You know, whenever a university job is filled, there's always a national search that's done. And we looked at several candidates who wanted to come in and run a student radio station. And there was something very compelling about Ian Punnett simply because he was he was essentially a national celebrity, I guess you would say. And he's somebody who at midlife decided to go back to school, get his PhD, and he wanted that one teaching job that would be perfect for him, and to be able to come to a university, a major university, to be able to take over a well-respected student radio station, to be able to take over a radio station that was sanctioned and had a lot of interest from the School of Journalism and Mass Communications. That was a big deal for him. So he felt that this was the perfect job for him. He didn't want any other jobs. He wanted this one. And he wanted to be able to come in and take this radio station to new heights. And he did that. If Ian Punnett was anything, he was enthusiastic about everything that he did. And one of the things that I recall so much about him was the fact that he said in his interview that he wanted to take this radio station and make it the best radio station run by students in the entire country. And the last time that I spoke with Ian was when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame of the Kansas Association of Broadcasters in the fall. And he came up to me and he said, "Remember what I told you? I was going to have this place #1 in the country in 5 years." He looks at me and says, "I did it in 4." We loved his enthusiasm. But you know, the other thing that we loved about Ian, I think probably you've understood that our students are in a very, very special environment here. When you're teaching media skills, we become more like mentors. We become much more like advisors in the classroom. And nobody filled that role more than Ian. You know, he was somebody who put students first in everything that he did. And that quality came through in the interview process. And it was a hands down slam dunk. This is the guy we want. We were very lucky to get him here. He was all about helping people find themselves, being exposed to the various types of skills that they might be interested in pursuing. Because of Ian Punnett, we've had people here who are now broadcast engineers because they showed a proclivity to do that while they were students. You know, we have students who have switched majors to come into KSDB-FM and are leaving this university with skills that are allowing them to do anything but what they came to college to do. I'm thinking of one person named Colby Van Camp, who is an opera singer, who is going to be the voice of Garden City High School play-by-play this coming fall. He came into radio and he found it. But Ian was the guy who made those pathways possible. And he showed that kind of personal interest in his students to be able to say, you know, you're really good at this, or you're really good at that. Have you ever thought about doing this, this, and this? See, it's that kind of coaching that's so important. And that's what we do in journalism and mass communications education. And we've lost a great one because he understood that role so well, and that's how he preferred to teach. Ian and I were very good friends. I'm an old radio guy, and he's a radio guy. And because of Ian's stature in the industry, I was always fascinated by Ian. And we would talk about so many things. You know, what I always found interesting about Ian Punnett, here he would be up all night doing a nationally syndicated talk show. The next day he'd be back on campus as if he had had 8 hours of sleep the night before, and he had not. I always wondered how he did that. You know, it's so interesting that when he was initially hired, University Relations wanted us to downplay the fact that he was the host of a nationally syndicated talk show because of the fact that this talk show dealt with all kinds of subjects, and they didn't want K-State's name associated with that. And I told Ian at the time, I said, Ian, go ahead. We're proud that you're here at K-State. You let me handle the people in Anderson Hall. And so that's what we did. And so because of him, so many people heard of Kansas State University, and they were in awe. People around the state were in awe because we here at K-State hired somebody like Ian Punnett. How in the heck did you guys pull this thing off? And so because of his stature, because of his industry stature, and because of the fact that here's a guy who had radio stories. Oh man, did he have radio stories. And I don't know if you have noticed this, but whenever old radio guys get together, they start telling stories. I'd tell him some of mine, he'd tell me some of his. And we had that kind of a relationship the entire time. I always respected what he did for students. And he respected the fact that I did everything I could to support faculty members, and we got along great. We're a better place because Ian Punnett was here. The dream job of his, unfortunately, got cut short. But I've known of very few people to make the kind of mark that he made in the short time that he was allowed to live and to fulfill his dream. I think that his lasting impact here is reflected in the careers of you and you guys and so many other people here. Whether you were part of the radio station or not, this man was out pushing for students, and he was doing everything that he could to make sure that our students were heard. He made sure that our students understood the professional opportunities that they had in front of them. You know, when Ian passed away, I was contacted by KMAN Radio here in town for my reaction, And I said at the time, it didn't matter what we had Ian teach. He could teach so many things, and he could do a great job at them. Whether it was mass communication law or mass communication in society, it didn't matter, because he always understood what needed to be taught in a class and what our students, especially the students here at K-State, needed to understand. Students are not the same at every university. There is a real culture here at K-State. And, he adapted very well to understand where our students were coming from. He understood their backgrounds. He agreed with me that if you do this teaching thing right, you can set yourself up to learn as much from the students as they learn from you. He subscribed to that theory, that idea, and because of that, he was able to adapt his teaching style to the people here at Kansas State University. And so I think he'll always be remembered for being the teacher's teacher, for being the guy who really captured what it means to be a college professor in a multimedia world, in a world where everything changes remarkably. He was able to do that and to instill that value in not only the students, but in the entire department. I think he'd done some teaching while he was finishing his PhD at Arizona State University. But a job like this, when you're going to be the chief operator of a radio station, the number one thing that you have to have is radio experience. Understand how a radio station goes together. Right now, they're writing a job description for who would ever be hired to be Ian's successor. And I was contacted and I was asked, what do you think ought to be one of the necessary qualifications? And I said, I think you have to have at least 3 to 5 years of experience in broadcasting, in running a radio station. Because if you're going to be the person who's responsible for making sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, all of the various things that a chief operator has to do when you're dealing with a federally licensed piece of property, that's got to be almost the number one qualification. Usually, teaching falls into place. And I say usually, we were so lucky with Ian because it did. It fell into place very, very well. He was able to immediately adapt to the classroom, and because of his wide experience and so on, he was able to bring so much to his classes. So he didn't have experience, a lot of classroom experience, but boy, did he have the all of the background to really make the classes interesting, informative, and even provocative, I think. I think what he did so well was instill that goal into the young people who open the microphones at KSDB. He's got people who are proud of what they do. They're proud of the stature. He was able to turn out students who understood so well the background that they had, and the fact that their grounding was going to prepare them for the kinds of careers they wanted, whether they went into radio or whether they went into advertising, or if they're going to go on to law school. It didn't matter, because he had done such a good job in helping people understand where they fit in this industry. And it's not that we didn't have that happening before. It's the fact that that was his number one goal. And so to be the number one station in the country is symbolic of so many things. And you know something, guys, what I find to be the most important thing about Ian, I see this happening with Andrew Smith, I see this happening with David Levy at the Collegian, is the fact that we have instructors who understand the importance of pushing students to achieve, pushing students to enter the state broadcasting competitions, getting students to enter the competitions for pacemaker awards and stuff like that they do in student publications. It would be just as easy for people like Ian Punnett to say, well, it's 5 o'clock, I'm done, go home, and not really, worry about much else. But with Ian, and Ian's wife, of course, Marjorie, was instrumental in this too, being able to push students to go on and try to put their work up against that produced by students nationwide. And let's see how good these K-State students really are. We never had that. We had people who won awards. We had advisors here who were getting students to enter awards, but to go to that next level, that higher class level of being the number one station in the nation, being number one in winning awards at the Kansas Association of Broadcasters. We have somebody in Vegas right now accepting a number one award for the BEA. All of that was Ian Punnett. It has his fingerprints all over it, and I think probably every student would say, yeah, if it hadn't been for Ian pushing me, I don't know if I would have even done this. Kansas State University will celebrate a centennial of broadcasting this year. In December of 1924, this university put on a radio station that later on was run by the Division of Extension. The two galvanized towers south of Calvin Hall are 100 years old, and they used to hold the antenna structure for KSAC radio, later called KKSU. And we are calling this project A Century of Sound and Service because broadcasting here at K-State was always something special. Some of the very foundations of National Public Radio, for example, came out of Kansas State University. K-State was one of the very first colleges and universities to broadcast their football and basketball games, and that happened on KSAC radio. This station was so instrumental in so many things. KSAC was even broadcasting college classes, if you can believe this, taking a college course on radio. But by golly, they did it, And so there were so many things, and of course, look at what that gave birth to, the Division of Continuing Education, now the Global Campus here at K-State. Radio was something that everybody inherently understood at the very start. And so we think that's worthy of a celebration. We proposed the idea to President Lincoln. He agreed that we needed to do that. And so this fall, there will be a big celebration of a century of sound and service. Well, this also happens to be the 75th anniversary of KSDB FM going on the air. And KSDB, from its very start, was again something that everybody understood the potential of doing. Their colleges and universities, by and large, didn't get student radio stations until 70s, some people into the 1980s. We had one back in 1949. And because we had that, our university has always kind of been at the forefront of electronic communication education. So Ian was part of our committee, and he was somebody who loved this idea of making sure that we do everything we can to really tout the fact that even though communications technology has changed, K-State's fascination with being at the forefront of cutting-edge technology has not changed. And that's got to be the message this fall when we do this celebration on campus. And by the way, it's going to be on the day that K-State plays Arizona in football. Here's the thing. Enthusiasm is contagious. I don't care how good your material is. If you don't walk into the classroom with a smile and a little bit of enthusiasm, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And, you know, when you have one person or two people or three people who treat who treat the information in their classes like it's important, like it's fun, like it's something that people ought to know. And if you're good at selling that material to people, then all of a sudden it rubs off on everybody else. Ian Punnett is going to be missed because that's one less cheerleader, if you will, who can take that material and make it exciting for people. The one thing that we have on the A.Q. Miller School faculty is a number of people who are able to take their material and get students excited about it. And you always hate it when you lose anybody who was one of the progenitors of that style of teaching. I found out that Ian was sick only about, I last saw him at the Kansas Association of Broadcasters convention in October. And I think I only found out about that maybe 2 weeks beforehand. And before the meal started, I sat down and talked to him, and we were just talking about the seriousness of this illness. But Ian Punnett was an optimist, and he said, we're going to find a donor. I'll probably miss a little bit of teaching here. You know, we may need to bring some people in to cover my classes for a while when I get this liver transplant. But I'm going to get the liver transplant. I'm going to be just as good as new. That was his attitude. And I think even the doctors, from what I understand, were shocked. I think everybody expected him to be able to hang on until a donor could be found. And his body just shut down. And before we knew it, we'd lost Ian. And it was sorrow. It took me about 3 or 4 days to get my head around the fact that he was gone. And, you know, of course, the question is, what do we do? I'm not associated with the school anymore. I'm retired. But I was very much on those conversations. What do we do? Who's going to be the chief operator of the radio station? What are the rules? How does this fit into the university structure? We've got to make sure that this is a position that is filled, because not everybody walking up and down the hall has that kind of ability, you know, that kind of background, that grounding. And so I was in on those early discussions. And I think that everybody was was still in shock even at Ian's memorial service. Um, by that time, we'd all accepted the fact that Ian was gone. But I'll never forget this memorial service. There was so much love in that room. There was love from faculty to student. There was love of Ian's former colleagues. There was love from faculty to faculty. There was love from community people to university people. It was just because of who this man was. And I told somebody that day, I said, he's with us here right now. He's here with us. Otherwise, nothing this beautiful, nothing this high-spirited and such a great outpouring of faith, a great outpouring of memories. None of it would happen if Ian wasn't with us right now. And for everybody who had been a part of Ian's life up until the end, that certainly was felt, I think, from an even greater standpoint. I hadn't been around him that much this past semester, but it was just one of those things where, because of the kind of man he was, his exit from this earth was even special. I hope that he understood the degree to which students held him in high regard. Because I saw it. I saw it in the people that he was starting to take under his wing and develop into various walks of talent, various walks of various types of jobs. I saw it, and I hope he did, because to me it's I never personally speaking, I never thought, well, I don't care what my colleagues think of me. But my big thing was, am I reaching the students, right? Am I getting through to the students? Am I serving the students? And I know that he had that kind of relationship with the students. I don't know that that people necessarily understand your impact until, sadly, you're gone. And whether you've quit and retired, or whatever it is, I don't know that people know exactly, how much they miss you. All I know is what I see registered in the students, and things that I hear from the students. The number one thing that he cared about, are the people who miss him the most. One wonderful thing is happening. The Kansas Association of Broadcasters has created an outstanding teaching award to be given annually in the name of Ian Punnett. Ian will be the first recipient. His wife Marjorie will be there to accept the award. And the criteria for that award is basically the thing we've been talking about here. And I think that's how anyone would want to be remembered. In the vast analysis of things that you think about when you get to be older in life, I think there are times that usually kicks in about midlife when you start worrying about what is your legacy going to be in this world. And I can't think of a greater compliment than to know that the State Broadcasting Association thinks enough of someone's qualifications, of someone's contributions to the industry, that you would, to give this kind of an award. Somewhere up there, he's smiling about that. Only in how he dealt with students, just on a regular basis. He came in and assumed the role of general manager. He came in and assumed the role of the person who's responsible, who's in charge. And KSDB had not had that kind of management before. The faculty advisor was the faculty advisor. The chief operator was the chief operator. We relied on students to run the station. With Ian, the students ran the station, but it was a guided type of experience. And if somebody was goofing up as on their job, on the various management roles at the station, he'd pull them aside and he'd tell them, you know. He'd teach them leadership as they were going along carrying out the duties of their job. And that's the thing I noticed immediately. The radio station was really in good hands, but it was in good hands because somebody knew their job and they knew what they wanted to do in that job. He was, when you consider that he was ordained, when you consider the fact that he was a national talk show host, when you consider that he's somebody who at midlife went back to get a PhD, when you consider that he was somebody who had already lived a very successful broadcasting career before he entered the classroom, you're talking about some pretty big shoes to fill. And I don't know that there'll ever be anybody quite like this man. I think that there will be people who are very, very strong who will come along and take that faculty job and do something with it. But I think he kind of stands in a field all by himself.